Sweden. Hélène founded ALEF, the Adult Learning and Empowerment Facilitators organization, in 2010. She has over 30 years experience in adult literacy and development, including a decade of fieldwork in Togo with SIL. Her approach, the approach of ALEF, very much links the idea that extreme poverty being closely linked with literacy, with the lack of abilities, the lack of opportunities to develop literacies. And ALEF's approach is based on a vision for a learner-oriented approach based on self-expression and the learner's capacity to initiate change through reflection in groups. ALEF's approach is used in Uganda, DRC, Benin and Togo, and at the moment 9,300 literacy learners have participated in the program. So Hélène, please tell us a little bit more about your program. Thank you very much. Hélène, you're muted.
There we go. I was just saying I've really enjoyed listening to the other speakers. If you've ever written a funding application to a major donor agency, you will know perfectly well that it's the donor who sets the agenda and who decides on the priorities and the needs. For every new application, you have to learn new buzzwords and new focus areas. We have a nice little word in Swedish, tolkningsföreträde, and Google Translate gives me a mouthful to pronounce in English, the interpretative prerogative. It may be very hard to say, but it's quite an important. It's about who takes or who holds the right to interpret the situation and to decide what the problem is, what the causes are, and what needs to be done. Is it road construction? Is it awareness of human rights? Is it gender equality? Is it basic health care? What has the donor decided is the thing which will fix everything this year? First slide, please. By taking the interpretative prerogative, the aid industry is in fact colonial. The major funders assume that they are the ones that can diagnose the ills of the world and prescribe the cure. If the receiving country is involved, it's usually on a very high level. It's the governments of the receiving countries who may be asked for their priorities or who may be given budget support to use as they find fit. But we rarely hear of development programs where the people actually living in poverty are asked to define their own problems and to tell about the causes of these problems and to propose how to solve them. When it comes to literacy and adult literacy programs, it's important to remember that reading and writing is always about texts. And texts are always about something. Texts describe and interpret reality. Even if these texts are just a sign which you walk past on your way to market or a ticket which you're handed by an official. In most literacy approaches which I have come across, the texts used in adult literacy are written by the outside provider of literacy, whether it's an NGO from the global north or the government of the country. And by writing the texts, the provider takes the right to define the problems and their solutions. And many of those texts, in my experience, speak down to the learners and tell them what to do. Some of us have seen examples like one I found in a Laubach primer, which went like this. Papa kills the goose, Mama kills the goose, Anna kills the goose, Pablo kills the goose, everybody kills the goose. But even the so-called functional literacy, where an effort really is made to adapt the text to the life situation of the learners, we come across texts like, you must plant your peanuts with enough space between them and not too deep. Or the classical, always wash your hands before you eat and after you have been to the toilet. And like Amadou said, people are made out to be making mistakes all the time and doing things wrongly and told how to do them correctly. For an adult, this is either minimizing or provocative. Either an already negative self-perception is reinforced. Yeah, I'm illiterate. I don't know how to take care of myself. I must be told what to do. Or slightly better maybe, why do these white people tell me what to do? They know absolutely nothing about my life and my situation. It was having seen a lot of literacy materials like this that made me start thinking that it must be possible to design adult literacy courses on the assumption that the adult learners are the experts of their own lives. They don't need to be told what to do or seen as ignorant or incapable. It must be possible to give them back the interpretative prerogative. So when I designed Aleph's method for literacy, it was on this assumption. And this conviction is reflected both in the method for the materials or for the teaching, but also in the method for designing the materials. I will give you 4 examples of how the interpretative prerogative is handed back to the learners in Aleph's method. Could we have the second slide, please? Okay, I hope the second slide's coming. The first one is to start by learning from the learners. When a new Aleph course is designed in a mother tongue, it's always done with a local actor who is familiar with the local communities and the people who will participate in the courses. But even so, one of the key elements in this creation process is to actually visit some of the locations where the project will be implemented and letting the population tell about how they understand their lives, their challenges, what they think the causes are, and what they think would help solve the problems. And I'm always, when I participate in this, I'm always surprised by the deep insights that people have about their own life situation, about the sometimes very complex factors which affect them, including things like climate change, global politics, local politics, social problems. The second principle is to use non-prescriptive texts. The project group, after having collected information about the learners, create a short text for each lesson in the course. And these texts are usually 1 or 2 sentences long, and they're never prescriptive. They just describe a typical situation which the learners can identify with. It could be something like, Mary discovered that her son had made the neighbor's daughter pregnant. Or when the same thief had been released by the police 4 times without a judgment, the population in the village decided to deal with it themselves. So they killed the thief. The third way of handing back the interpretative prerogative is to use open-ended discussions. In an Aleph lesson, after having read the text together, learned a new letter from this text, the group goes on to discuss the topic of the text. And the discussion is based on 3 questions. Do we have similar experiences? Why do these things happen? And what can we do about this? And the group leaders are trained to function here as moderators. Actually, Amadou, they sit down during the discussion to be on level with the participants. So their role is to ensure that everybody gets to speak, not to teach or to lecture on the topic or to make conclusions. Fourthly, we hand back the ownership of the text to the learners. At the end of the discussion, they are asked to dictate the text, which the group leader writes on the blackboard. And again, the group leader functions here as a secretary, not as an editor-in-chief. He or she just writes down the words of the participants. Let them argue between them and decide what to write. And the effect on the learners when they see their own words in writing and hear them read back to them is absolutely electrifying. And this is done from the very first lesson. So from lesson 1, the learners are the owners of the text and the owners of their own problems and their solutions. And this, to me, is decolonizing literacy. Thank you.